First question is, for the most part of our so-called waking state, many of us are not focused on self-investigation. So we are involved or caught up in our everyday life in which we make all kinds of diverse experiences. According to Bhagavan's teachings, our so-called waking state is nothing but another dream. That means that all our experiences in waking and dreaming are unreal. But are they therefore worthless? Do we not learn much just from those experiences in waking and dream in order to develop gradually a certain degree of ripeness to understand the teaching deeper? Very good question.
Very good question. Yeah, it is true. That is, all that we are experiencing now is a dream, and it is therefore unreal. But what we are experiencing is given to us by Bhagavan. It is the fruit of our past actions, but it's the fruit of our past actions carefully selected by him as being those fruit that would be most conducive to our spiritual development. So whatever we experience in this life, whatever pleasures and pains, whatever difficulties, everything we experience in our life, everything that is given to us to experience is all his will. In the sense that, though it is the fruit of our past actions, it has been selected by him because there are sanchita, the store of the fruits of our past actions that we haven't yet experienced. It's a vast, vast heap. The word sanchita means a heap or pile, because generally speaking, in every lifetime, we are accumulating far more fruit. In each lifetime, we experience one lifetime worth of fruit, but we will be maybe accumulating 10 lifetimes of fruit. So after countless billions of lifetimes, we have accumulated a vast store of fruit, only a tiny proportion of which we can experience in each lifetime. So what we experience has been chosen by him as being what will be most conducive to our spiritual development. So yes, all this is conducive to our spiritual development, but these are the most favorable circumstances Bhagavan has given us. But we can't just rely on the favorable circumstances he has given us and think, oh, but if I experience all these things, then I will mature. No, how these things work is we benefit by what Bhagavan has given us to experience to the extent to which it motivates us to turn back within. If we continue allowing our mind to go outwards, we are failing to derive the full benefit from the experiences that Bhagavan has given us. So, though we have no freedom to change what we are to experience in this lifetime, we are free to make use of this or not make use of it. How do we make use of it? The best way to make use of it is to think deeply about his teaching, to understand that none of this is real, and therefore to turn within. That is the greatest use we can make of all these experiences. So we are failing to learn the lesson so long as we are looking outward. So we need to look within more and more and more. You began your question, the person who asked this, you began your question by saying most of the time our mind is going outwards. Yes, that is sadly the case, because this is because of the strength of our Vishaya Vasanas. But though we all start off on this path with strong Vishaya Vasanas, and I think speaking for myself and probably for most of us, we still feel our Vishaya Vasanas are still very strong. In fact, we're probably more aware of the strength of our Vishaya Vasanas now than we were in the past, because the deeper we go in this path, the more we come to recognize how strong our Vishaya Vasanas are. So because of the strength of our Vishaya Vasanas, which are our own inclinations, because that means when we talk about strong Vishaya Vasana, that means we've got strong inclinations to go outwards. We are spending most of our time dwelling on things other than ourselves, rather than dwelling on ourselves alone. So that is a sad state of affairs, but that is the state of affairs at present. How to change, how to transform this state of affairs, how to wean ourselves off our habit of going outwards, only by patient and persistent practice of trying to turn within. It doesn't matter how many times our mind goes outwards, we should again try to turn it within. So long as we are trying sincerely to turn our mind within, we are moving in the right direction. The more we turn our mind within, the faster the progress we will make. So when we look outwards and we see all the tremendous suffering in the world, and when the only refuge for us, there's no refuge in this world. The only safety, the only place of refuge is in the depth of our own heart, the feet of Bhagavan. So we need to look within more and more and more. We need to, and by doing so, we will cultivate the love to look within more and more and more, and weaken our inclination to go outwards. So yes, all this is given to us for a purpose. But the purpose is to turn our mind within. If we are failing to turn our mind within, if we're not even trying to turn our mind within, then we are missing this. We are failing to derive the benefit that Bhagavan wants us to gain by giving us these experiences. So I hope this is a sufficiently clear answer to that question.
The question was by Joseph Bruckner.
Okay.
The next question is regarding vasanas. If vasanas by themselves have no inherent power of their own, why are some vasanas more persistent than others? Why does it take us longer to overcome or eradicate certain vasanas when compared to others? Is one's ability to remain self-attentive for long periods directly dependent on the intensity or lack thereof of one's vasanas?
Yeah. The final question, the answer to the final question, yes. It is true, vasanas have no power of their own. That doesn't mean they have no power, but the power they have is the power we give them. Because vasanas are not something, we are not the vasanas, but the vasanas are not something, they don't exist independent of us. That is, vasanas are our own inclinations. So as inclinations, they are jada. They have no power of their own. But they do have, or they seem to have, the power, but we have invested in them. How do we invest power in the vasanas? By allowing ourselves to be swayed by any vasana, we are thereby investing our own power in that vasana. The more we allow ourselves to be swayed by a particular vasana, the stronger that vasana becomes. That vasana has no inherent strength of its own. Whatever strength it has, it derives entirely from us. And it derives its power because we allow ourselves to be swayed by it. So the way to weaken any Vishaya Vasana is to not allow ourselves to be swayed by it. To the extent to which we allow ourselves to be swayed by any particular Vasana, to that extent we are strengthening that Vasana. And to the extent to which we refrain from being swayed by a Vasana, to that extent we are weakening it. This is where the efficacy of patient and persistent practice of self-attentiveness, why this is so efficacious, because the more we are trying to hold on to self-attentiveness, the more we're trying to turn within and hold on to self-attentiveness, the more we are thereby strengthening the sat vasana, the inclination to turn within and be self-attentive. And because by turning within and being self-attentive, we are we are not allowing ourselves to be swayed by other vasanas, so we are weakening the other vasanas. So the vasanas, as Bhagavan says, they arise in countless numbers, like ocean waves, and they come from time immemorial. But their vasanas are in a constant state of flux. That if we see our life, we can see things that interested us in the past no longer interest us. Things that didn't interest us in the past now interest us. When we were a small child, Bhagavan's teachings may not have seemed so interesting. Probably most of us didn't know about Bhagavan's teachings as a child. Even if we did, they probably wouldn't have been of much interest to us. But now, and things that interested us as a child probably don't interest us now. So, but our interests change, the vasanas change over time. But the change from one type of vasana to another is a gradual process, because we are slowly shifting our interests from one thing to another thing. So the things that preoccupied us but seemed very important to us as a child no longer seem so important to us, but other things seem important to us. So the vasanas are changing. That is because of whichever vasanas we allow ourselves to be swayed by more, they grow strong and gain ascendancy. But also another thing we've discovered, the more we look within, the more the vasanas that were there deep in our heart, but were not rising to the surface previously, they begin to rise to the surface. So we find many very strong vasanas that we previously may have not been aware of because we were outward looking. But the more we look within, the deeper we go within, the more all the skeletons in our cupboard, so to speak, all the demons within begin to come out. So yes, Bhagavan often used to say, this spiritual path is nothing but a fight going on within our own will, a fight between our sat vasana and our vishaya vasanas. More superficially, before we come to this spiritual path, or when we're trying to lead a good life, say, but we're not much interested in spiritual things. Even then, there's a fight going on within us between the subha vasanas and the asubha vasanas. Subha vasanas means the auspicious or the favorable, agreeable vasanas. Asubha vasanas means the unfavorable one. So for instance, for a worldly person, they will have both subha and asubha vasanas. They are free either to be swayed by their asubha vasanas and to do bad actions, or to refrain from being swayed by the asubha vasanas and try to be swayed only by the subha vasana, the good vasanas, and thereby to do good actions. So we are all, wherever we are on the spiritual path, we are being, so many vasanas are arising within us, and we are free to choose which vasanas we allow ourselves to be swayed by. This is what is meant by freedom of will. The vasanas are coming from time immemorial. We can't suddenly decide, I'm going to give up all these vasanas. It would be very nice if we could, but we can't do it all of a sudden. But we are free to decide moment by moment which vasana we allow ourselves to be swayed by. We may not view it in this way, but actually, if we think of it, throughout our life, there are so many inclinations rising in our mind. Sometimes we may be inclined to say something mean to someone, or a cutting remark or something. And then we feel, no, I shouldn't hurt this person. This person may have been hurting me, but I shouldn't hurt them back. So in this way, I just say that as an example. But in all of our lives, anyone who has any sort of moral compass, who is trying to lead a better life, trying to lead a righteous and upright, honest life, will be trying to avoid the inclinations that they perceive as doing harm to others, and to only follow those inclinations which are not harmful. So in this way, all of us, whether we have whether we have knowingly come to this spiritual path or not, we are all constantly being pushed this way and that way by our vasanas, and we are the ones who decide which vasanas we allow to sway us and which vasanas we don't allow to sway us. And this is intimately connected with the law of karma, because the law of karma is based on the principle: if you do good actions, you will experience good fruit. If you do bad actions, you will experience bad fruit. So whatever good actions and whatever bad actions, the actions we do under the sway of subha vasanas are good actions. The actions we do under the sway of asubha vasanas are bad actions. This is why Bhagavan says in the 19th paragraph of Nana, there are not two minds, a good mind and a bad mind. What he means by two minds, there's two kinds of mind. Mind is only one. That is, the mind is neutral. It's the vasanas that are of two kinds, subha and asubha. When the mind is under the sway of subha vasanas, we call it a good mind. When it's under the sway of asubha vasanas, we call it a bad mind. Obviously, all these terms, subha, asubha, good, bad, these are all relative terms. What may seem to be good in one context will seem to be bad in another context. Actions that in the past we may have felt were good actions, we may now feel a bad action. So these are all relative terms. But in that 19th paragraph, Bhagavan clearly, people who say, oh, we have got no freedom of will, they don't know what they're talking about, because Bhagavan is clearly saying there, our behavior is influenced by our vasanas. If we are under the sway of asubha vasanas, we will do bad actions. If we are under the sway of subha vasanas, we'll do good actions. So are we free to choose which vasanas we allow ourselves to be swayed by? Yes, that very much so. That is where freedom of will lies. So we are free. So many vasanas are rising, pulling our mind this way, that way. We have the freedom to be swayed by this vasana or that vasana. So for ordinary worldly people, worldly people, I don't mean bad people, I mean ordinary people whose minds are outward going, the basic choice they face is between those vasanas, being swayed by those vasanas that are more subha in nature, or by those that are more asubha in nature. So this is why some people we see, they lead good lives. They're caring about others. They try not to hurt others' feelings, and they try to alleviate suffering when they see it. If someone is in a state of sadness or bereavement, they give them time, give them a patient, a caring ear to lend a caring ear. Or when they see a person in difficulty, they try to help them. So these are all good actions. There are other people who, though they may have a slight inkling in their heart, oh, this person is suffering, I should help them. No, but I'm more important than them. So instead of, this person may be hungry, but I'm not going to give my food to them because I may be hungry if I give my food to them. So better I keep my food. So these are subha vasanas. So like this, throughout our life, vasana, every moment by moment, so many different types of vasanas are rising in our mind. And we are the one who decide which vasanas we allow ourselves to be swayed by, which vasanas we don't allow ourselves to be swayed by. The more we refrain from being swayed by asubha vasanas and allow ourselves to be swayed instead only by subha vasanas, the more our mind is thereby purified. So this is what is happening for the vast majority of people. But once we have come to Bhagavan's path, we understand that better than any subha vasana, because even subha, the normal, what we normally call subha vasanas, even they are vishaya vasanas. The really good vasana, the truly subha vasana, the vasana that is absolutely subha in nature, is only the sat vasana, that is the inclination to turn within. So now our challenge is not merely to avoid the relatively bad vasanas and follow only the relatively good vasanas. Our aim now is to be swayed only by the perfectly good vasana, a Sat Vasana, and to avoid being swayed by any Vishaya Vasana. Of course, it's more important to avoid being swayed by the Asubha ones than the Subha ones, but even the Subha Vasanas we don't want to be swayed by. In other words, we want to turn within more and more. But as the previous question I had, the majority of time, our attention is still going outwards because we're still very much under the sway of our vasanas. So long as our attention is going outwards, it's very important, but at least we avoid being swayed by the more asubha vasanas. So long as our mind is going outwards, we try to avoid the asubha vasanas, being swayed by the Subha Vasanas, and allow ourselves to be swayed only by the Subha Vasanas. But better than being swayed by the Subha Vasanas is to be swayed by Sat Vasana. Being swayed by Sat Vasana means turning our attention back within. So we are slowly moving away from the more harmful vasanas to the less harmful vasanas. But eventually we want to be swayed only by the Sat Vasana. So this is how the purification of mind takes place. The purification of our mind is entirely in our own hand. And the reason why in Sanskrit, the term for purification of mind is chitta suddhi. Chitta, in some contexts, it means the mind in general. But in this context, that is the specific meaning for the term chitta is the will. So the chittam is the totality of all our vasanas. That is the chittam. So the impurities are in our mind, are the impurities in our will. That is our vasanas. So all Vishaya vasanas are impurities. Some of them are filthier than others. So within the impure vasanas, there are relatively pure ones and relatively more impure ones, but they all ultimately are impurities. The only pure vasana is the Sat Vasana. So we're slowly trying to move away from allowing ourselves to be swayed by the very bad vasanas to the not so bad vasanas, to the not so bad vasanas. But now we've come to Bhagavan's path, we are trying to be swayed only by the best, the only truly good vasana, the only absolutely good vasana, which is the Sat Vasana, the vasana, the inclination to turn within. Because it's only by the strength of Sat Vasana that we will subside back into our source and thereby surrender ourselves entirely to Him. So I think I've answered most of the questions there. Regarding the thing about why some vasanas are stronger than others, yes, it's because we've allowed ourselves to be swayed by them more. The more we allow ourselves to be swayed by a vasana, the stronger it becomes. So that's why we want to be, we try to be swayed only by our Sat Vasana, our inclination to turn within. So long as our attention is going outwards, we try to be swayed by good vasanas. As far as Vishaya Vasana is concerned, what are the best Vishayas? Bhagavan's teachings, Bhagavan, Arunachala. If we can do nothing else, at least be looking at Bhagavan's picture, looking at his eyes, because the outward form of Bhagavan, like all outward forms, is a Vishaya. I mean, everything other than I, all objects, all phenomena are Vishayas. Though the outward form of Bhagavan himself is not a Vishaya. Bhagavan is the reality that shines in our heart as I. But the outward form of Bhagavan is a Vishaya, but it's a very special Vishaya because it's a Vishaya that has appeared in order to turn us back to the one within, to see the reality of the one who sees all Vishayas. So merely looking at the eyes of Bhagavan prompts us to, it kindles in our heart a liking to turn within. So so long as our mind is going outwards, we should try to keep our mind dwelling as much as possible on on Bhagavan and his teachings, because they will be constantly encouraging us to turn back within. So I hope I've answered all the elements of that question.
Yes, thank you, Michael. Thank you very much.
Right.
The next question is, when ego discovers its real nature and returns to the world, does do the activities in which it is consumed have a different character than before finding its real nature?
When ego finds its real nature, it ceases to be ego. There's no returning. Bhagavan says, once you're caught in the jaws of the tiger, there's no escaping. Now we've been caught in the jaws of the tiger. Once the tiger swallows us, we can never come out again. Seeing what we actually are means the destruction of ego. And once ego is destroyed, there is no outside to come back to, because everything inside and outside exists only in the view of ego. We talk about inside and outside because so long as we have risen as ego, our attention is going towards other things. We call that outside. Anything other than ourselves is outside. That doesn't mean only the material things of the world. Even our own thoughts, feelings, likes, dislikes, vasanas, and everything, they're all outside. They're all veli vishayam, as Bhagavan says. So we need to give up all of these and turn within. Once we turn within and see what we actually are, ego, to tell you the truth, ego can never see what it actually is. Because as soon as we as ego see what we actually are, we thereby cease to be ego. So it is necessary for us as ego to see what we actually are. We have to try to see what we actually are. But seeing what we actually are is the very death, is the death, destruction, eradication of ego. So there's no possibility of seeing what we actually are and coming out again. Once we see what we actually are, ego is destroyed. When ego is destroyed, everything is destroyed. So there's no outside to come to. There is only I am, only that pure, infinite ocean of Satchidananda, but we actually are, which is, now we talk of it as inside, because we need to look back. Inside means towards ourselves. So we have to look towards ourselves in order to see, in order to experience ourselves as that infinite ocean of Satchidananda. Once we experience ourselves as that infinite ocean of Satchidananda, metaphorically we can say it's both inside and outside. But the truth is, it is beyond all such distinction. There is no inside and outside. Bhagavan says this very, very clearly in the 7th verse of Arunachala Ashtakam. This is a very, very important verse. What Bhagavan says in the 7th verse of Arunachala Ashtakam. Indraham enum nenevu enil pira ondrum indru. If the thought called I does not exist, even one other thing will not exist. The thought called I means ego. Until then, that until ego is completely eradicated, if any other thought arises, merge back within by investigating thus. To whom? To me. What is the place from which I rose? To whom means, to whom does all this appear? To me. Who am I? That is, Bhagavan isn't asking us to question this. He's asking us to investigate, to look back within, to see the one to whom all this has appeared, namely me. And once our attention is turned back to ourselves, we need to focus our attention so keenly on ourselves that we thereby see the place from which we arose. What is the place from which we rose? What is it that exists in the absence of ego? Only the fundamental awareness I am. So the fundamental awareness I am, that is our real nature. That is the place from which ego rises. So we need to look at ourselves so keenly, but we don't see any of the adjuncts. The ego, the thought called I, is nothing but the adjunct mixed awareness, I am this body. When we are investigating ourselves, we are not investigating the body. We're investigating I am, which is the source from which this ego arose, which is the essence of ego, the reality of ego. So we're looking at ego we're looking at the essence of ego so keenly, but we see only I am and not the adjuncts. That is the implication. So, and then he goes on to say, Ul Andu, sinking within, if one reaches the heart throne, one will be the very emperor under the shade of a single umbrella. That's a metaphorical. In ancient days in India, a Chakravarti, an emperor who has an empire, he's referred to as the emperor under the shade of a single umbrella. That means under his single umbrella, he's got so many different regions, so many different territories, are all under the sway of his, of that one, and that sway of that emperor. So having a single umbrella was the symbol of an emperor. So here Bhagavan uses that term, Oru Kudai Nihal Kove, the emperor, that is, the literal meaning is the one umbrella shade emperor. That means that's a metaphorical way of describing God, who is the supreme Lord of the whole universe. In other words, what we actually are. And then he goes on to say, Indru, Aham Puram, Iru Vinay, Irul Jammam, Imbu Tumbu, Irul Oli, Enam Kanavu. That means the dream which consists of inside and outside, the two karmas. Two karmas here means the good karmas or bad karmas. Death and birth, happiness and misery, darkness and light will not exist. So when ego sees what it actually is, it ceases to be ego. In the absence of ego, as Bhagavan says, if the thought called I does not exist, even one other thing will not exist. So what happens when we see ourselves as we actually are? The dream of duality, which consists of pairs of opposites, such as inside and outside, good and bad actions, death and birth, happiness and misery, darkness and light, will not exist. So once we have seen what we actually are, there is no possibility of our ever again looking out, because there's no outside to look to. There is only what actually exists is only ourselves. So he concludes this verse by saying, Idea Mandru Aham Achalama Nadomidum Aruna Enum Ele Arum Arol Oli Kadale. What that means is only the infinite ocean of light, of the light of grace called Arunnamalai, that's another name for Arunachala, which dances motionlessly in the court of the heart. How does he dance motionlessly? As I am only I. And so the implication of this final sentence is when this dream of all these pairs of opposites comes to an end, because ego has come to an end, what will then exist is only the infinite ocean of the light of grace. The light of grace is the light of pure awareness and infinite love, called Arunnamalai, which dances motionlessly as in the court of the heart. Elsewhere in, this is the second last verse of Arunachashtakam. After Arunachashtakam comes Arunachala Pancharatnam. In the second verse of Arunachala Pancharatnam, Bhagavan says, you always dance in the heart as I. Nityamum, nan endru idiam, endru idia, nadu tiduvei. Since you always nadu tiduveyal, since you always dance in the heart as I. So Arunachala is ever dancing in our heart as I. Unpeatan, your name itself is heart. So they say. So the heart means it is Arunachala itself. So the one who is dancing in our heart as I is itself the heart, and that is Arunachala. And that alone is what it will exist when we see ourselves as we actually are. So people often talk about having glimpses of reality. There is no such thing as a glimpse of reality, because firstly, the reality is not an object. You can have a glimpse of an object, but you cannot have a glimpse of the reality. When we see the reality, when we see what the reality means, what we actually are, when we see what we actually are, we will thereby cease to be ego, because ego is nothing but a false awareness of ourselves. Awareness of ourselves is something other than what we actually are. So when we see ourselves as we actually are, we thereby cease to be ego. So once we see what we actually are, there's no such thing as a glimpse of what we actually are. That is, when people talk about glimpse, the closest we can come to such an idea of a glimpse, that is, the more we look within, the greater the degree of clarity of self-awareness. That's what Bhagavan calls sparana. But sparana we shouldn't take as a glimpse of reality. Sparana is just, we are seeing ourselves more and more clearly as we actually are, as I am I alone. But when we actually see ourselves as we actually are, when we see ourselves with full clarity, we thereby cease to exist as ego and remain as pure awareness. That is, if we see a rope and mistake it to be a snake, in order to get rid of the snake, we have to look at it very carefully to see what it actually is. The more closely we look at it, the more we begin to doubt, oh, maybe it's not a snake. Yes, it seems to be, it's lying very still. Could it be a rope? We're still not sure until we actually see it as a rope. But the more we look at it, the less real the snake seems to be. And when we actually see what it is, when we actually see it as a rope, then we can never again see it as a snake. If we haven't seen it clearly enough, we're still in doubt. Is it a snake? Is it perhaps a rope? Could it be just a rope? We're still in doubt. That is the stage of sparana. That's the stage of practice. When we turn within, we're aware of ourselves as I am only I. But again, our attention comes out and we again seem to be this body. So we still haven't experienced ourselves as ourself alone with full clarity. When we see ourselves as we actually are with full clarity, but when we look at the snake carefully enough and see that it's just a rope, then the snake can never return. And in the absence of the snake, there's no going outwards. The snake here is ego. It's the ego that goes in and out. Only in the view of ego is there such a distinction of in and out. I hope this adequately answers that question.
Thank you, Michael. I made a question. Maybe I was referring to what happens to me. It's I identify with what you said about this struggle, and sometimes I can be very conscious. But the day comes on, you have to go to work, and it's a very ego work. It's like it's like for me, I just identify in this stage of my spiritual path, I just identify these two stages, being conscious or being in myself, but also being in the world, so to say.
Yes.
So what I meant is that when you begin to be more and more in yourself, does it change the way you interact with the world in some sort?
Yes, it does, certainly, because that is, the more we turn within, the more our satvasana, which is the liking to subside, liking to be more and more humble, more and more not in a negative way, but in a positive way, unmindful of the world, and that the world begins to lose its reality. So our satvasana is being strengthened, our vishaya vasanas are being weakened. So things that in the past may have, for example, irritated us, what does it matter? We are no longer bothered to the same extent by the things that would have bothered us in the past. The things that in the past may have been great disappointments in our life. That's life. Some things work out, some things don't work out. We are less perturbed by the adverse things that happen in our life, and we are also less elated by the what we previously would have seemed a very great big deal for us. If, for example, in the past, if we had won the lottery, we would have been jumping for joy. Now, if we win the lottery, you may think, okay, Bhagavan, for some reason, has given me this money. Maybe this is a bit more than I need. So first, let me give away all the surplus to other people. Our reaction will be quite different. So, I just use this lottery, for example. I'm not saying that we're going to be buying lottery tickets, but I'm just saying the things that in the past would have elated us will no longer elate us. The things that in the past would have depressed us or made us feel bad or sad, or we take everything with far greater equanimity. So this is where we see surrender, the benefit of surrender in practice, because turning within is surrendering ourselves. The more we turn within, the more that attitude of surrender will permeate throughout our life. So the things in the past that would have agitated us no longer agitate us. So we live a far more peaceful and contented life. We are far less affected by the ups and downs of life. This is what Bhagavan means in the 13th paragraph of Nana, when he talks about putting the burden on God. When we put the entire burden on him, when we leave things to him, we're no longer perturbed. Whatever may happen, okay, it's his will. Sometimes favorable things happen, sometimes unfavorable things happen. That is life. We are less perturbed by them. This is what Bhagavan says. When you're traveling on a train, don't carry your luggage on your head. Put it aside. So the more we go deep in this path of self-investigation and self-surrender, the more we are putting the burden aside. And so we travel at ease. So our life becomes, to the extent to which we follow Bhagavan's path, our life becomes pleasant. That is, we may not have annihilated ego, but can any of us say that we have not experienced the benefit of following Bhagavan's path? The more we follow his path, the more we can see the benefit of that in our day-to-day life. I don't know if that's your experience. That's certainly my experience.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. It describes perfectly what is happening. Thank you very much.
Yes, right.
The next question is, why do we believe in traditional Advaita, the feeling I am is a reflection of Brahman through the mind and body and not Brahman itself? And the second question is...
Shall I answer one by one? That's maybe easier, because otherwise I tend to forget. That is, whatever words are used, it is... Words are interpreted by the mind. The mind is always interpreting things. We can see that not only as far as words are concerned, so many perceptions are coming into our mind. We are constantly interpreting them. We see something lying on the ground. Our mind interprets it as a snake. But what it actually is only a rope, but our mind has interpreted it. Likewise, when we see people's actions, sometimes a person may do something perfectly innocently without any malice, but we interpret it, oh, this person is doing that deliberately. So the mind is constantly interpreting the inputs. So it's the same with words. When you and I are speaking, I may say something, and you may interpret what I say in quite a different way to the way I meant it. Likewise with the words of sages, we all read the Upanishads, the Bhagavan's teachings or whatever, but how we understand it is according to our mind. That's why Bhagavan once said, that is in soon after Bhagavan had composed Uludunapadu, Lakshman Sharma came to Bhagavan, and Bhagavan asked him one day, have you read Uludunapadu? Lakshman Sharma said, no, Bhagavan, because he's a Tamilian, Lakshman Sharma, but he had studied Sanskrit. So he said, Bhagavan, I'm a Sanskrit student, not a Tamil student, so it's very difficult for me to understand. But then he thought to himself, Bhagavan himself has asked me, this is a very good opportunity. So he added, but if Bhagavan would be gracious to teach me, I would like to study it. So Bhagavan began to teach him the meaning of Uludunapdu. And then he started to because he was interested in Sanskrit poetry, he started trying to translate it into Sanskrit. And with Bhagavan's help, he made a Sanskrit translation. That came to a knowledge of Kabali Sastry, who once visited. Kabali Sastry by that time was living in Aurobindo, in Pondicherry with Aurobindo. Kabali Sastry was one of Kaviraghanta's disciples. So he was visiting the ashram on his way from Pondicherry to Sirsi, where Kaviraganta was living at that time. Because this was after Kaviraganta had left Bhagavan and was living in Sirsi. So Kabali Sastry came. He was told about this, but this translation had been made of Uludunapdu in Sanskrit. So he asked to see a copy. So Lakshman Sharma, he asked Bhagavan, and Bhagavan said to Lakshman Sharma showed him a copy. And then he said, can I take a copy of this to show to Kaviraganta, because I'm on my way to Sirsi? Bhagavan and Lakshman Sharma said, yes, certainly. So he took a copy of it and he went to Sirsi. And when he went to Sirsi, he showed it to Kaviraganta, and Kaviraganta then decided to make his own translation. He didn't have much knowledge of Tamil. He could speak Tamil, but he didn't have much knowledge of literary Tamil, but Vishwanatha Swami was there. So Vishwanatha Swami explained to him the meaning of the Tamil verses. He then wrote in Sanskrit. And the name of Lakshman Sharma's translation was, the name that Bhagavan and Lakshman Sharma had given it was Sat Darshanam. Kaviraganta took that name, gave it to his work, sent it back to the ashram with a letter to Bhagavan saying, perceiving my inability to correct the version of Lakshman Sharma, I felt moved to write my own version. So please tell the ashram manager not to publish this till my disciple, until Kapali has finished writing his commentary. So even before Bhagavan had seen it, he took for granted that his version is a version which should be published by ashram. Of course, it's much better Sanskrit because he's a great poet in Sanskrit. So when Lakshman Sharma saw it, he said, oh, Bhagavan, this is very beautiful. I'll take this for my Parayana. But Bhagavan said, no. Start making your own, start redoing your own translation in a longer meter. And Lakshman Sharma was surprised. Then Bhagavan said, they hate Advaita like poison. They have twisted it. So Bhagavan explained to him all the flaws in Sat Darshanam. And he explained to him why they had translated it like that. Some months later, Kabali Sastry sent his, he wrote a Sanskrit commentary. He translated it. And he translated it into English, and Vishwanatha Swami translated it into Tamil. Within a few months, all three of these versions were published by the ashram. Chinnaswami was very happy because he was just beginning the publication of ashram books. And he thought these would be very popular because they're written by very learned people. Chinnaswami doesn't know much about the teachings or the philosophy or anything. He just thought, oh, this is going to be very good, good books to publish by the ashram. So when Lakshman Sharma read the commentary, he found how he could see what Bhagavan had explained to him. He saw very clearly how they were twisting the teachings. So he asked Bhagavan, if you allow this to be published in your own lifetime by your own ashram, will not people in future think you've approved this? Then Bhagavan simply smiled and said, according to the purity of the antakarana, that means according to the purity of the mind, the same teachings will reflect in different ways. If you think you can write a better commentary, write your own commentary. So what Bhagavan meant by that is, we each understand these things according to our own, that is, everything goes through the filter of our own understanding. So the teachings of Advaita are extremely simple, but extremely, at the same time, extremely deep and subtle. So it's no wonder that people have understood it in so many different ways. What the Mahabhagyas say is, I am Brahman, you are that. They are not saying that I am is a reflection of Brahman. They are saying I am is Brahman itself. what is a reflection of Brahman is the adjunct mixed awareness I am. That is, I am mixed with and completed with adjuncts as I am this body. So ego is a reflection of Brahman. We can call it a reflection. The actual technical term in Sanskrit is chidabhasa. Chid means chit, the awareness. Abhasa means, the primary meaning of abhasa is a semblance or likeness. So it is not the real awareness, it's a mere likeness of awareness. Why is it not real awareness? Because real awareness is only the pure awareness I am. Because nothing other than I am is real. So being aware of the nature of ego is to be always, firstly, to be aware of itself as I am this body, and secondly, to be aware of other things. Since all these things that ego is aware of don't actually exist, being aware of what doesn't actually exist cannot be real awareness. So it's not real. Ego is not a real awareness. It's a likeness of awareness. It's chidabhasa. But abhasa, just if you see your mirror, your reflection in a mirror, what are you seeing? You're not seeing yourself in the mirror. You're seeing a likeness of yourself. So abhasa, a secondary meaning of abhasa, is a reflection. So, and sometimes they refer to it as Chit Saye, I think, something like that. That is the shadow of Chit. So all these are just different ways of describing what is actually indescribable. So these words are understood differently by different people. So some people misinterpret it, but I am is merely a reflection of Brahman. No, I am is Brahman itself. The reflection is the false awareness, I am this body. That is ego. So ego is the reflection. But at the heart of ego, there is the pure awareness I am. That is, ego is, as Bhagavan often said, chit jada granti. Chit means the pure awareness I am, satchit. Jada is referring to the body, which is insentient. Jada means insentient, not aware. And granti means a not. So the awareness, non-awareness, not. That means the awareness is this I am. The non-awareness is the body. These two are mixed and conflated as if they are one. This is the granti, this is the not. So by mistaking this body to be ourself, this false awareness, I am this body, this is chit jada granti. But in that chit jada granti, though the awareness I am this body is wholly false, it has an element of reality in it. That element of reality is I am. That I am is Brahman. That is what the Mahavakyas are pointing out. So how do we know Brahman? We cannot know Brahman outside. We can only know Brahman by looking back within. That means that I am alone. So the same teachings, as Bhagavan says, according to the purity of the Antakarana, the same teachings are reflected in different ways. So over the centuries, so many thousands and thousands of people have studied Vedanta and understood it in their own way. In the time, Shankara established Advaita as the correct interpretation of Vedanta, but many people were not satisfied with that. So after Shankara came Ramanuja, who said, no, this is going, Shankara has gone too far. It can't mean that. So he brought in Vishishtadvaita, which is a type of sort of diluted type of Advaita. It's not Advaita at all, actually. And after him came Madhava, who said, no, even this Vishishtadvaita is not the thing. I and God are quite different. So he also interprets the Mahavakyas in his own way. So the same thing, that is what can be plainer, more simple and more obvious, the meaning of I am Brahman or you are that. But these statements by the Vishishtadvaitins and the Dvaitins and the Beda Vedantins and the Achintya Beda, there's so many different interpretations of Vedanta. Each interpret these Mahavakyas in quite different ways. But Madhava doesn't take it, but I mean, I don't know how I haven't studied all this philosophy, but I know he takes it in quite a different way. He thinks that Mahavakyas are important. Everyone agrees Mahavakyas are important, but he interprets it in quite a different way. even among the Advaitins, there's so many different understandings. After Shankara, there were several different schools of interpretation among his disciples. Some thought the jiva is a reflection of Brahman. Some thought the jiva is a limited form of Brahman. Because that is, Shankara probably had described it as both. But they then, each one took that as this interpretation, jiva is only a limitation of Brahman. No, jiva is a reflection of Brahman. These are just ways of describing the same thing. We can describe jiva, yes, in a certain sense, it is a reflection of Brahman. In a certain sense, it is Brahman in a limited form. But these are mere descriptions. We shouldn't take the descriptions too literally. But they took the descriptions literally and started having different schools of thought and arguments among themselves and everything. And then they were being attacked by so many non-Advaitins, so they then had to defend Advaita, so they had to try and argue, and it became more and more confusion as it passed through more and more minds. So Bhagavan has come and revealed to us what is the practical, what is the purpose of all Vedanta. If Vedanta doesn't have a practical import, it's of no use. That is, it's very nice to know I am Brahman, but so long as I feel I'm this little jiva, I'm this little person called Michael, the idea that I am Brahman is just that. It's a mere idea. So how do we? Yes, it may be true. That idea may be an expression of the truth, but I'm not experiencing myself as Brahman now. So how can, if it is true that I am Brahman, how can I experience myself as Brahman? That is what Vedanta is there for a practical purpose. Why is it said you are that? Because till now we've been looking outside for Brahman or for God or for happiness or for knowledge or whatever it is. We are all human endeavor, over 90.99999% of human endeavor is outward. Outward means even the workings of the intellect, it's all outward. Everything other than I is outward. So the intellect is always going outwards. The purpose of the Mahavakya is to turn our attention back within. That's why Bhagavan says in verse 32 of Ulladu, I'll paraphrase, it's not the exact meaning, but it's the implication. When the Vedas say you are that, instead of investigating what am I, to think I am not this, I am that, is due to weakness of mind. So if we understand the Vedas correctly, if we understand the Mahavakyas correctly, they are trying to turn our attention back to ourselves. So when we are told you are that, what should our response be? Oh, if I am that, then what am I? How can I know Brahman? Only by knowing myself. I have to look within. But that is missed by people. So the purpose of Bhagavan's avatara, the reason Bhagavan was necessary for Bhagavan to come, was firstly to simplify, to present Advaita in a much simpler way. Because the more complicated it becomes, the more room there is for confusion. So Bhagavan's teachings are the simple essence of Vedanta. But most importantly of all, Bhagavan has highlighted the practical implications of Vedanta. So it is true, in the past, Vedanta has been misunderstood in so many ways. And even now it's misunderstood in so many ways. Even among the devotees of Bhagavan, his teachings are misunderstood in so many ways. So this is inevitable because such is the nature of the mind. That's why if we want to understand Vedanta deeply and correctly, if you want to understand Bhagavan's teachings deeply and correctly, that is, it starts off with Sravana. First we have to hear. First we have to know what's being taught. Then we have to think about it deeply. That is called manana. And it's at the stage of manana, but some people go deep in their manana. Many people don't go deep. They just float on the surface and they go off in so many directions. That is why so many interpretations end up. We can do the manana deeply only to the extent that we do nididhyasana. Nididhyasana is the actual practice of turning within. Because when we turn within, we are turning back towards the pure awareness I am. That is the light that illumines the mind, but it enables us to know all this. So the original light, the source of all light, is I am. The more we turn towards I am, the more our mind is purified and clarified. And only in a pure and clear mind will the words of Vedanta reflect clearly and correctly. If you've got a dirty mirror and you want to see your face in it, first you've got to clean the mirror. Otherwise, you'll be just seeing a distorted version of your face. So we can understand the meaning of Vedanta only to the extent to which we've gone deep within. By going deep within, it gives us the clarity to do the deep manana. So if you listen to lecturers on Vedanta, they'll say, first you have to do sravana, you have to know what is taught. Then you have to do manana, to understand it. And then you have to do nididhyasana, as if it's three things. First you master your sravana. That's like passing the first level exams at school. Then you go on to do manana. You then pass the high school, and then you go on to university, and you finally get your degree. It's not like that. It is Bhagavan made it clear. Sravana, manana, nididhyasana. It is an iterative process. We do a little. We read a little. When we read, if we're reading properly, we should be thinking deeply. What does this mean? What is the implication of these words? So the sravana leads seamlessly to manana. And if we understand what is being taught there, that manana will lead to nididhyasana. It will turn our attention back within. Oh, this is talking about I. This is telling me to investigate who am I. This Mahavakya says that I am Brahman, then who am I? So we turn our attention within. The more we turn our attention within, the more clarity we get from within. Then when we read the same words again, we see far more depth of meaning in them, far more implication in them. So the deeper our nididhyasana, the deeper will become our sravana. And the deeper our sravana, the deeper the manana, the deeper. So it's an iterative process. As we go deeper and deeper in the practice, our sravana and manana will become clearer. This we can see from our own experience. If we've been following Bhagavan for some years, when we first came to Bhagavan, we would have read Nana, Uladunapdu, and these things, we would have understood a little. But as we go deeper and deeper in the practice, the meaning of these texts, Bhagavan's words are really wonderful, because as we go deeper in this, following his path, his words reveal more and more and more, and we see far more depth of meaning, far more implication in them than we were able to perceive at first. That is because the mind is being purified. So this sravana, manana, nididhyasana is essential. But the key is the nididhyasana. Without the sravana, without the nididhyasana means, literal meaning of nididhyasana is deep contemplation. Contemplation on what? On what is real. What is real is only I am. That's the Mahabharata's point out. So it's only by self-contemplation, in other words, by Atma-vichara, by turning our attention within, but we get the clarity to understand correctly. But many people, they don't take to the practice. They don't try and turn their attention within. So it's only with the surface level of their intellect, they're trying to understand and interpret the words. And of course, they interpret it in different ways. Of course, they misunderstand it in so many different ways. That is inevitable. So how do we avoid all this? Only by following what Bhagavan has taught us, which is the practical implication of all of Vedanta, which is turning within, looking deeper within our heart. Then only we'll get the clarity to understand all these things. So was there a second part of that question?
Yeah. Bhagavan used to say to people, when asked about japa, that japa is our real nature, that japa goes on automatically. What does he mean here? Is japa?
Right. Okay. Bhagavan, that is Bhagavan, to understand Bhagavan, we need to understand what his aim is. Bhagavan had one aim and one aim alone, which is to turn our attention back towards ourselves. Why? Because we are that. So whatever Bhagavan said, he was trying to draw our attention back to ourselves. So sometimes Bhagavan said things like this. I mean, I don't know how accurately this is recorded, but I think Bhagavan may have said something like this. But what I infer Bhagavan meant by that is that which is always shining repeatedly. That repeatedly, not in the sense of like some people say, the spurana I means the vibrating of I, or I pulsating of I. No, that is not what he means. That continuity, japa, though it's a repetition, it's about the essence of japa is the continuity. You're repeating the name Ram, 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 Ram. There's a continuity. The aim of japa is to fix your name fix your mind, fix your attention on the name of God. So you repeat the name of God in order to keep up that continuity of remembrance of God. So when Bhagavan says, japa is your real nature, he's talking about that continuity. What is the one thing that is ever continuous? Our real nature, that pure awareness I am. So that underlying awareness I am, that is what Bhagavan metaphorically referred to as the japa, that is your real nature. That is that continuity of awareness. So when Bhagavan says things, we shouldn't just take, if we want to understand them correctly, we shouldn't just take the surface meaning of the words. We should think deeply about what he means. And in order to understand, now, obviously, that's not his main teaching. He hasn't written in Ulladu Napadu or Upadeshundya or Arunachastuti Panchakam, japa is your real nature. He said that in reply to a particular question. But we have to understand that in the light of his core teachings. In the light of his core teachings, what is our real nature? Just that fundamental awareness I am, but is continuous. So that when he said japa is your real nature, he meant that your real nature is that which is continuous, underlying everything. That is whatever else we may experience, but one thing we always experience is our own being, I am. That is what he referred to metaphorically as the eternal japa. It doesn't mean that inside our heart there's some pulsating going on. I am, or I, or I hyphen. No, it is that is the same words. The word spurana in some contexts can mean pulsating, because what spurana essentially means, it actually comes from a verb, spur. Spur means to shine forth or make itself known. So a pulsation is something that makes itself known. A pulsating light, for example, is making itself known. Anything that makes itself known is a spurana. But what is the spurana Bhagavan is talking about? He's talking about the aham spurana, the spurana of I. I is not pulsating. I is continuous, unbroken. So we need to think deeply about these things to understand what Bhagavan is actually pointing at. Otherwise, we can easily take the words very superficially. Oh, Bhagavan has said japa is my real nature. So if I continue doing my japa, if I continue doing Ram, 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 or Ramana, 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 that is my real nature. No, that is not what Bhagavan is saying. What he means is that which is continuous is our real nature. What is continuous? That fundamental awareness I am, which is ever shining without a break. I hope that answers that question adequately.
Yes, thank you very much. I agree that Advaita is many ideas which seems sometimes different from what Bhagavan says.
Yes, because
not all of them, but
yeah, it's been interpreted in so many different ways. That's why in Nana, Bhagavan actually corrects even in Uludnab, he's correcting misinterpretations, because many people may hear the Mahavakyas, it is said, but neti, so I'm not this body, and it said I'm Brahman. So how do I realize that? I meditate. I am not this body, I am Brahman. So people take that as a meditation. So Bhagavan has corrected that in Uludunabdu. He said that mere weakness of mind doing so. But though it may be an aid to think like that, that is not the inquiry. The inquiry, the investigation is to turn our mind within and to sink deep into our own heart. In Nana, he says that is one very prevalent idea among the so-called traditional Vedantins, the traditional Advaitins, is they think, but it's true, the root cause of all problems is ajnana, ignorance. So the only remedy for ignorance is knowledge. So where can you get knowledge? You can only get knowledge from the Upanishads. So they go on studying all these Vedantic texts, thinking that they're thereby going to get knowledge. Bhagavan doesn't disagree with the fact that ignorance is a problem, or that knowledge is the solution. But what Bhagavan says is, what is that avidya? What is that ajnana? It is nothing but the false awareness I am this body. That is ego. So long as we rise as ego, whatever knowledge we as ego gather, that is when we're reading the Sastras, we're gaining knowledge. Ego is gaining knowledge. So that knowledge we get from the Sastras cannot dispel ignorance. As Ramakrishna Paramahamsa said, the almanac, the Panchangam, will tell you when it's going to rain. But however much you squeeze the pages of the Panchangam, you will not get a drop of water from them. Likewise, we cannot get a drop of Brahman, a drop of Satchidananda, by however much we squeeze all the Vedas and the Upanishads and the commentaries on them and the Brahma Sutras and the Bhagavad Gita, we will not get a drop of Satchidananda. Just like the Panchangam tells you when it's going to rain, the Upanishads, they're telling us where to look for that Satchidananda. You are that. We have to look within. So Bhagavan says in that 16th paragraph of Nana, all the texts, all the Vedantic texts, they all say that to attain mukti, it's necessary to bring about the subjugation of mind. When we know this truth, we need to subjugate the mind. How to subjugate the mind? We cannot subjugate the mind by studying books. It's only within ourselves. That is, those books are pointing our attention back to ourselves. So we shouldn't be reading books without limit. Bhagavan says it's pointless reading books without limit. We need to turn our attention back within and investigate ourselves within ourselves. We can't know ourselves in books. We can only know ourselves in our own heart. So he points out, but trying to know the Brahman from the scriptures is futile. The scriptures serve a purpose to turn our attention back to ourselves by telling us we are Brahman. But from the scriptures itself, we cannot get Brahmanyana. And then in the 17th paragraph, he talks about, he says, just like it's useless to analyze all the hair in a barber shop, but it's all rubbish, but it's to be swept up and thrown away. Instead of doing so, if you begin to analyze it, how many long hairs, how many short hairs, how many black hairs, gray hairs, red hairs, blonde hairs, that curly hairs, straight hairs, all this analysis is useless. Bhagavan said, likewise, investigating all that, analyzing all the tattvas and enumerating tattvas. Are there 36 tattvas or 24 tattvas, or that different philosophers have different numbers of tattvas? According to Bhagavan, there's only one tattva, tane. We ourselves alone are the tattva. But these philosophers have so many different tattvas. Tattvas mean basic ontological principles, or what they take to be real. Bhagavan said, analyzing all these things is futile. But in Vedanta Sastras, if you read, If you read, for example, Vedanta Saram, which is a very standard primer text that people begin to study when they begin to study Vedanta, it will tell you the subtle body has 17 parts, and those 17 parts are the five sense organs, the five organs of action, the five pranas, and the mind and intellect. These 17, this is all unnecessary analysis. Why do we need to learn all this? Bhagavan sometimes used to say, what is the point of teaching things, and then later, things that you know later you're going to have to say all this is useless? What is the benefit of knowing that the subtle body consists of 17 parts? How is it of any use to us? We are trying to free ourselves from this gross body, subtle body, causal body. They're all anatma. They're all not self. What is Atma? Only I am. So we hold on to I am. That is the whole point of it, but people miss the point. So that's why Bhagavan, if we really want to get the benefit of Vedanta, we don't have to read any commentaries. We don't have to even read the Upanishads. All we have to read is Bhagavan's teachings. Bhagavan, in ancient times, it was considered a person is an acharya only if they write commentary on the Upanishads, the Brahma Sutra, and the Bhagavad Gita. Then only are you qualified to be an acharya, like Shankaracharya or Ramanujacharya or Madhvacharya. Does that mean Bhagavan hasn't written commentaries on any of these? Does that mean he's not an acharya? No, he is the real acharya, because he hasn't written commentaries on the text themselves, but he has revealed the import of all those texts in his few little writings in Tamil, in Uludunapadu, in this little Appaḻa Pāṭṭu, in Atma-Vidya, in these few little songs. He has revealed the whole essence of all that we need to learn from all the Upanishads and all the Brahma Sutras and the Bhagavad Gita and all the other commentaries on them. The essence of it all, what is actually useful. He has revealed it all. So Bhagavan's teachings are the ultimate commentary on the whole of Vedanta.
Yeah, thank you very much, Michael.
Francis, would you like to ask the question, please?
Sure, thank you. Michael, I kind of asked you this once before through email, but I wanted to just love Ramana's direct teaching, but I've had I get in trouble, not trouble, but when I have this deep seated love for Jesus, and it doesn't matter because it's all one, and I can read, just practice self-inquiry and then just have this bhakti. But what happens sometimes to me is that I've talked to, you talk to others and they talk about devotion to guru, and it throws me because I know Ramana wouldn't care. I know that Mr. Chadwick was there's many that were great devotees of Ramana who were lovers of Jesus. But I guess the question is, at the level of realization, I was told that everything must go, even God, before, just like Lao Tzu said, before God was the Tao, beyond, as Buddha said. So it's almost like, and yet this individual, when I become an individual, I fear giving up Jesus. When there's a fear of, I have to have surgery, for instance, next week. I'm going under. Or if I was in a foxhole in the Ukraine, which God bless them. But there's just such a deep faith. My mother died at 4 and left me with Christ. She died of cancer, and I was 4 years, 11 months old. She instilled this magnificent faith. But I had to study Ramana. I had to study Advaita Vedanta to understand what Jesus was saying. So I don't go and hang around with a lot of Christians. I read Ramana and I studied Nisargadatta. I studied the Vedantists. So yet at the end of the line, to surrender completely into the self, I am that, I'm being told I have to let go of Jesus.
Who is Jesus? He himself said, before Abraham was, I am. So though he appeared in human form, that human form was certainly not before Abraham. That chronologically, historically, that form called Jesus was long after Abraham. But what he reveals by saying, before Abraham was, I am, and Bhagavan pointed out an important thing here. He didn't say before Abraham was, I was. He said before Abraham was, I am. He is pointing there to the eternal I am. So what Jesus is not the person who was born and lived for 30 years or 32 years or so on in Galilee during the time of the Roman Empire. He is that eternal I am. Yes, he appeared in that form in order to give certain teachings, but were appropriate to the people of that time. And what did he say? He said, see, they will tell you, look here, look there. But I say, look, see, the kingdom of God is within you. He didn't just say the kingdom of God is within you. He said, lo. Lo means look. He is directing us to look within ourselves. So what Jesus, if we understand it correctly, what Jesus is teaching us is the same that Bhagavan is teaching us. And he also, towards the end of his life, when he was just shortly before he was crucified, when he was praying in the Garden of Gethsemane or something, he prayed to God, may they be one in as I am one in you, may they be one in me. So he was praying for oneness. That is Advaita.
Yes.
The vast majority of Christians will disagree with us. We have no argument with them. They interpret his teachings at the level that is suitable for them. That is fine. That is not a problem, because that's what's appropriate for them. But when we view the life and teachings of Jesus through the clear lens of Bhagavan's teachings, we can see he's teaching the same thing.
I totally agree with you, Michael. But what I'm saying is, you're talking about Bhagavan. Your heart. I've seen your heart melt.
Yeah.
With your thoughts. I've seen you tear up and melt with the thought of Ramana. And I love Ramana too, and I have gigantic photo in my bedroom. But what I'm saying is, but at the end of the line, even though I love Ramana, and yet there is no place for someone like me in terms of any. You have to surrender it all. Even the teacher, the guru, the whole thing has to go. You
never have to surrender guru. You have to surrender the form of guru. But even that you need not worry about. If you surrender your own form, the form of guru will also go. And then the reality of guru will remain. That eternal I am, that is God, that is Jesus, that is Bhagavan, that alone will remain. So we are not, by turning within, we are not renouncing guru. We are renouncing our own form, and thereby we're renouncing the form of guru, but thereby we discover the true form of guru, the swarupa of guru, which is I am. So Bhagavan gave a nice interpretation of the Christian Trinity. For the vast majority of Christians, this idea of the Trinity is such a central idea to their faith. It seems very unintelligible for people who are not Christians. God is one. How can they say there are three persons in one God? It doesn't make sense to others. Bhagavan gave a very nice, neat explanation for it. He said, God the Father is Ishvara. God the Son is Guru. God the Holy Spirit is Atma-swarupa, our own real nature. They are all one. That is, what is actually real is only Atma-swarupa. Because our attention is facing outwards, we first see ourselves as the infinite God who has, we believe, has created the world and so on. But that God, so we worship that God, we develop love for that God. When our love for God has matured sufficiently, God then appears in the form of Guru, and the function of Guru is to turn our attention back towards ourselves. Because the reality of God, the reality of Guru, is the reality of ourself. I am. So that is the function of Guru. So God, Bhagavan often used to say, God, Guru, and Self are one and the same. And that is the inner meaning of the Christian Trinity. So when you hold on to yourself, you are not letting go of Jesus, you are embracing Jesus. Because Jesus is that which is ever shining in your heart as I. He is that eternal I, the I am that existed long before Abraham and will exist long after Francis and Michael and everyone else has gone. He is that which, he is what we actually are. So by turning within, we may be leaving behind the form of Guru, but we are embracing the reality of Guru.
Thank you, Michael.
And the more we turn within, the more our own form drops off. When our own form drops off, the form of Guru will also disappear. So long as we have a form, yes, Guru has a form. Ramana is our Guru, or Jesus is our Guru, whoever is our Guru. Just like we have a form, because we have a form, we see him as having a form. But the more we turn within, the more our own form drops off, and we merge back into that formless reality, which is the formless reality not only of ourselves, but also of Guru, also of Jesus or Bhagavan or Ramakrishna Paramahamsa or Buddha or whoever we take as our Guru. The reality of Guru is that which is always shining in our heart as I. The very purpose of why was Jesus born? To tell God, to point people back towards, it may be lost now because what we have in the Gospels is relatively little, but even in the little that has survived, we can see hints of it. Unless you die and are born again, you shall not enter the kingdom of God. There's so many Advaitic teachings there in the Bible, if we understand them in the light of Bhagavan's teachings. What does he mean by dying and being born again? We must die as ego and thereby restore our real nature. That is what it meant by, it's not literally being born again. It is discovering what we always actually are. So if we understand it correctly, the teachings are all pointing in the same direction. It's up to us whether we follow that direction or not. What is that direction? Back within. The more we merge within, the more we will discover Jesus in our own heart. And therefore, we won't feel that we are leaving Jesus. We won't feel that we're renouncing Jesus. We are embracing Jesus. We are merging back into Jesus.
Thank you, Michael.
That is, Bhagavan's teachings have made things so clear and simple to us. All these things, the things that seem confusing before, the things that seem to we seem to be torn between the form and the formlessness. It's all these are not real dilemmas, because that which appeared outside in form, as Jesus or Bhagavan or Arunachala or Buddha or Rama or Krishna or Ramakrishna or anyone, it is that which is always shining in our heart as I. And the purpose of all the outward manifestations is only to turn us back within, to discover the reality within our own heart.
Michael, may I add something?
Yes.
I was just listening then to Francis's comment about facing adversity, whether it's his upcoming operation.
Oh yes, I forgot to say, I hope all goes well with your operation. I meant to say that.
Yes, me too.
Yeah.
And also when Jesus faced adversity, what I remember particularly is when he faced Pilate, and Pilate said to him, "Don't you know that I have the power to condemn you?" And Jesus kept quiet. And I always remember he kept completely silent and said, why isn't he saying anything? And then Jesus said, "Don't you know that the one who has given you the power to condemn me has the greater sin?" Yes.
Yes.
He kept quiet. He surrendered.
Yes.
And I just wanted to give that little reflection on what's happening in Ukraine and what Francis might be experiencing in the coming week.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
There is one more question.
Yes.
Yeah. How did Bhagavan define grace? And also, did he believe in predestiny?
How did Bhagavan define grace? I don't think Bhagavan ever, as far as I'm aware, he never gave a definition of grace as such. But what we can understand, what we can infer from his teachings is Bhagavan often said, Guru and grace, or God and grace, are one and the same. That is, grace is the power of Guru, but Guru and his power are one and the same. The power of grace is the power of love. What grace, that is, this is not what Bhagavan said in so many words, as far as I'm aware, but it's what I think we can reasonably infer from his teachings. Because he often said grace is the very nature of Guru, grace is the very nature of God. Grace is that is what God or Guru actually is our own real nature. What we actually are is God or Guru. So as we actually are, we have infinite love for ourselves as we actually are, because nothing other than ourselves exists. So from the perspective of Bhagavan, he doesn't see us as other than himself. So Bhagavan loves all of us. However great a sinner we may be, Bhagavan's love is equal for all. Bhagavan's love is totally impartial, because he doesn't see us as egos. He sees the reality. He sees what we actually are, which is nothing but himself. So because he sees us as himself, he loves us as himself. So his love is all embracing. Because his love is all embracing, that love is what manifests in the form of grace, which is the power that draws us back to our own real nature, to the love, to the infinite love that we actually are. So grace is Bhagavan himself. That infinite love that he has for us as himself is what we experience as his grace. Is that I mean, I could say more about it, but I think that's as close as we can get to a definition of grace. That is, it's not exactly a definition of grace. It's pointing towards what is implied by the word grace. And in Bhagavan's teachings, grace is all important. In the final verse of Atma-Vidya, the final three sentences are Aralam Vainame, Ambu Puname, Imbu Torname. Aralam Vainame means grace is also necessary. Grace is also certainly necessary. Vainame, that A means it's certainly necessary. Ambu Puname. Purnam literally means adorn yourself with love. In other words, have love. That is, what is the love? Our grace is the love that he has for us. We must respond to that love with love for him. That is, we can open our heart to the love that he's always ready to give us only by loving him in return. So grace is necessary, have love. And what is the result? Imbutorname, happiness will appear. What is that happiness? That happiness is our real nature. It's ever present. We are always that happiness. But so long as we are looking outwards, so long as we are misusing our love to love the things of the world instead of to love what we actually are, we are turning our back on the infinite happiness that we actually are. When we develop love to turn within, and that love comes to us, in our stony heart, but is always seeking pleasures outside, how does this love to turn within arise in us? That is purely by grace. So it's the grace gives us the love to turn within, and then happiness appears. So for Bhagavan, grace is all important. And the word he uses there for grace is aral, which is a Tamil word for grace. That is probably the most frequently used word in the whole of Arunachal Stuti Panchakam, particularly in Arunachal. So many of the verses have the word aral in, either as a noun or as a verb, because it's both a noun and a verb. And that is, it didn't stop with just that word aral. He used so many other words. Kripe means grace. Karune means grace. So many words borrowed from Sanskrit also he used. So grace is all important in Bhagavan's teaching. Bhagavan sometimes said, grace is the beginning, the middle, and the end. What does he mean by that? It is grace that has drawn us to this path. It is grace that motivates us to follow this path. It is grace that guides us, supports us, and gives us solace while we are following this path. And eventually, it is grace that will swallow us, because grace is nothing but the light of awareness that is ever shining in our heart as I am I. When we lose ourselves in that, that is the consummation of grace. That is, grace is swallowing us.
Thanks for that, Michael. That was a very nice explanation.
And was there another question you asked? One was about grace and...
Yeah, no, sorry, I was just going to comment about, because it's very hard to find an actual definition of grace, no matter what spiritual tradition there is.
It's possibly the reason is it's undefinable. Can you define love?
Exactly, yeah, no, I completely. I've heard someone say spiritual sunshine, which is quite nice, but yeah, it's undefinable. Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, and the second question was, did Bhagavan believe in predestiny?
Yes, that is, Bhagavan taught us. That is what is predestined. But there's a lot of confusion about this, because what Bhagavan taught is actually very simple, but we need to understand it clearly. It's easy to particularly because a lot of things have been recorded in books. And if we don't understand the core teachings of Bhagavan, it's easy to misinterpret what is said. That is, Bhagavan taught the law of karma. The law of karma, as it's taught in Advaita, and as Bhagavan taught it, is that whatever actions we do according to our will means under the sway of our vasanas, those actions are what are called agamya. That is, actions we do, as I say, under the sway of our vasanas, or we can say it according to our will. These are agamya. Whatever agamya we do has fruit. If we do good agamya, it yields good fruit. If we do bad agamya, it yields bad fruit. Most of the agamya we do is probably pretty neutral, so most of the fruit are pretty neutral. All the fruit that we do, for the karmas we do, the agamya we do in this lifetime, gets stored in what is called sanchita. That is, whatever action you do in this lifetime, you cannot experience the fruit of that action in this lifetime. It seems to us, I did such an action and I got such a result. So it seems to us we are experiencing the results of action. That is, I wanted to study and get a PhD. So I worked hard and I got my PhD. So the result of my working to get the PhD is I got the PhD. That is the result of my action. It may seem to us, but that is the result of the action that we've done in this life. But that is not actually so. That is, whatever actions we do in this lifetime cannot bear fruit in this lifetime. The fruit of the actions we do in this lifetime gets stored in Sanchita. Because in every lifetime, we experience we do far more agamya when we are able to experience the fruit of our previous karmas. Sanchita is an ever-growing pile. From that pile of Sanchita, God selects, God or Guru, whatever we want to say, selects for each lifetime what of the fruit for us to experience in this lifetime. So everything we are to experience in this lifetime is predestined. It is predetermined. It is the fruit of our past actions selected by God as being as being those fruit that will be most conducive to our spiritual development in this lifetime. So that is called prarabdha. Prarabdha means the fruit of past actions that we are to experience now. Bhagavan said, whatever you experience in this lifetime, that is, whatever happens to you, is prarabdha. And he also said, whether you call it prarabdha or the will of God or Guru, it's all the same, because it's God who has selected. Though the prarabdha is the fruit of actions we've done in the past, it is the fruit selected by him. So it's all according to his will. So all that we are to experience in this lifetime is predetermined. As Bhagavan said to his mother, that which is not to happen, that which is never to happen, will not happen, however much effort you make. That which is to happen will not stop, however much you try to obstruct it. So we have no freedom to change what we are destined to experience in this lifetime. It's already, that is predetermined. But that doesn't mean we don't have freedom. We do have freedom. Where our freedom lies is that is, it's misusing our freedom, we do agamya. That is, where the freedom lies is, we have a will. Our will consists of vasanas. Vasanas means inclinations. We have so many different inclinations in our will. We are not bound by our inclinations. That is, we don't have to do what we may be inclined to do something. I may be inclined to go and rob the bank, but I'm not, my inclination to go and rob the bank doesn't force me to go and rob the bank. It's up to me. I am free either to follow that inclination and go and rob the bank and get myself into trouble and probably end up in prison, or I'm free to not do that, to do something. Okay, I want money. Let me try and earn money in a more righteous way. So we have different inclinations pulling us in different directions. So we can follow this inclination or that inclination. We have that freedom. And depending on what inclinations we follow, the actions we do will either be good actions or bad actions or pretty neutral actions. And who decides what fruit are appropriate? Only God. And who decides when, where, and how we should have experienced those fruit? Only God. So what we are to experience is predestined. What we do is we have the freedom to allow ourselves to be swayed by this vasana or that vasana. According to the vasanas which we're swayed by, we act accordingly by mind, speech, and body. So we have freedom of will, in that we are free to be swayed or not swayed by any particular vasana. We also have freedom of action. That is, when we are swayed by a vasana, we do an action. So that action is according to our will. So we have freedom of will and freedom of action. That is what Bhagavan called Ichcha. Ichcha Swatantra is the freedom of will. Kriya Swatantra is freedom of action. He often spoke of it as Icha Kriya Swatantra, the freedom of will and action. So we have that freedom, but we don't, though we have freedom to want whatever we want to want, and we have freedom to try for whatever we want to want, we want to try for, we have no freedom to experience anything that is not already predetermined. So the predetermination determines what we are to experience. Our will determines what we want to experience. So the predetermination cannot obstruct our will. It may be my destiny to live in poverty all my life, but that doesn't stop me wanting to be very rich. And likewise, though I want to be very rich, it's my destiny to be poor. However much I want to be rich, however much I try to be rich, I'm going to be poor. So that is, according to Bhagavan, predetermination and freedom of will are not, they are not incompatible. They are compatible. In fact, whatever we experience, it is the fruit of what we have done, misusing our freedom of will in the past.
Okay, super. Thanks for that, Michael. I'm going to have to mull over that one.
Yes.
Is there a specific book that Bhagavan talks about this, which you could point me to, as in the predestined?
Well, a lot has been recorded because people ask Bhagavan questions, but some of the answers that have been recorded are a little bit misleading because the people who recorded them didn't understand what Bhagavan was saying. And so they recorded what they understood. They very sincerely, they recorded, but they recorded what they understood rather than what he actually said. There's a note he wrote for his mother in which he expressed, that is, Bhagavan, to find the real teachings of Bhagavan, it's in his original writings. And his original writings are often very brief. But within them, a huge amount of meaning is packed. When Bhagavan was 16, about 6 weeks after he had that death experience in Madurai, he left home, leaving a note. And he came to Tiruvannamalai. For a long time, his family didn't know where he was. But after a year or after maybe a couple of years, the news came to his family, but he was living as a sadhu in Tiruvannamalai. So in December 1898, about 2 years and 3 months or 4 months after 2 years and 3 months after Bhagavan had left home, his mother came to Tiruvannamalai, and her aim was to beg him to come home. So he was at that time living on a spur of the hill, an eastern spur of the hill called Pavla Kundru. So she came there and she was weeping and begging him to come home. He was just sitting there quietly. In those days, he spoke very little. Most people thought he was keeping a vow of silence. There was no such thing. He never took any vow of any sort, but he just happened not to be speaking. He may have, in those days, may have spoken a little, but very, very little. So there he was sitting there, seemingly unmoved, and his mother was weeping. So the other people who were present, they felt much pain to see his mother weeping and begging him to come home, and him sitting there seemingly indifferent. Actually, Bhagavan was very gracious to his mother, but often he was seemingly harsh with her. That was in order to root out her attachments. But anyway, on that occasion, someone who was present gave Bhagavan a paper and pencil and asked him, he said, if you don't want to reply by words, at least reply in writing. And Bhagavan wrote a note in Tamil. What he said in that note, I'll go through it sentence by sentence, because this contains the essence of Bhagavan's teachings on this subject. He said, firstly, avarabha prarabdha prakaram adakanavan angangirundu atuvipan. What that means is, according to the prarabdha, that's a predetermined, what the destiny of this lifetime. According to the destiny of each one, he who is for that, being there, will make them dance. What that means is, according to the destiny of each one, means that is what the destiny, the prarabdha, is not the actions we are what is predetermined is not the actions we're going to do, but what we are going to experience. However, in order to experience what we are destined to experience, if it's your destiny this evening to have a tasty meal, you have to do something to have that tasty meal. You maybe have to cook it yourself, or you have to at least go, and if someone else cooks it for you, you at least have to sit down and take the food and put it in your mouth. So in order for us to experience what is destined to experience, there are certain actions we need to do. So what he's saying in that first sentence is, according to the destiny, he who is for that means God or Guru, the one who ordains the fruit of the action. He who is for that, being there, that means being in each place. It implies being in the heart of each one of us. Atma-vichara means will make them dance, in other words, will make them act. So if it's your destiny to eat a tasty meal now, you have to put the food, at least do something. You have to put the food in your mouth and chew it. So that you'll be made to do. But this is where many people misinterpret. They say, oh, Bhagavan has said, whatever you do, God makes you do. If God makes us do, then the actions are God's actions, and he should bear the fruit. Why should we bear the fruit of the action? So that is obviously a misinterpretation. Bhagavan doesn't say that all the actions we do are actions we're made to do by God. Those that are necessary for us to experience the prarabdha, the destiny, those actions will be made to do. But even though we're made to do it, for example, supposing it's your destiny today to have a tasty meal and you have to cook it yourself, you may think about what shall I cook, what are the ingredients, and how will I make it very tasty? So you think about it, and then you prepare the meal and everything. That may all be your destiny to prepare that meal, but because you also are preparing it with a liking, you want to enjoy a tasty meal. So though the action is action you're made to do by God, your will is also driving those actions, because often our will happens to be in line with the will of God. It's our destiny today to eat a tasty meal, and we want to eat a tasty meal. So the two go hand in hand. So the actions we take to eat that tasty meal are actions driven both by God in accordance with our prarabdha and by us in accordance with our will. So since they're driven by us in accordance with our will, we have to experience the fruit of them. If it's an action that we're made to do by God without any will on our part, then we don't have to experience the fruit. So these are very subtle things. So that's the first sentence. In the second sentence, he says, what I said earlier, that which is never to happen will not happen in spite of any amount of effort. That is, you may want to eat a tasty meal today. You may try to eat a tasty meal today, but if you're not destined to eat it, you'll get distracted, your phone will ring, and you'll answer the phone call, you'll forget about the meal, and it'll get burnt. And then you've got no more ingredients, and the shops are closed, you have to go to bed hungry. So you wanted to eat a tasty meal, you tried to eat a tasty meal, but because it's your destiny to go to bed tonight hungry, you go to bed tonight hungry. You can't change that. And in the next sentence, he said the same thing the other way around. That which is to happen will not stop in spite of any amount of obstruction. If it is your destiny to undergo surgery next week, such as in the case of Francis, you may not want to undergo surgery. You may try your best to avoid surgery. But if it's your destiny, you will have to undergo that. So there's so many things that happen to us in our life, but we don't want. We may try our best to avoid them, but they come and we have to experience them because they're our destiny. So whatever is destined not to happen will not happen. Whatever is destined to happen will happen. And then he says in the next sentence, iduve tinnam, this is certain. Ahalin monamai irike nandru. Therefore, being silent is good. What does he mean by being silent? Does he mean that we shouldn't do any action at all? No, because whatever actions we need to do in accordance with destiny, we'll be made to do. We cannot avoid doing certain actions. What he means by being silent is not rising as ego. Only when we rise as ego do we have likes and dislikes and act according to our likes and dislikes. So being silent means not rising, subsiding and remaining in our source. If we remain in our source, whatever is destined to happen is going to happen. We are no concern of ours because we are happily subsided in the heart. So that is one place where Bhagavan said it. He also gave some more information about this in the early verses of Upadesh Undiyar. So there are places in his original works where he's pointed towards these things. And for example, in verse 38 of Ulunapadu, he says, if we are the doer of actions, we will have to experience the resulting fruit. If we investigate, if we know who is the doer, if we know ourselves by investigating who is the doer of actions, all three karmas will come to an end. All three karmas means the agamya, the sanchita, and prarabdha. He said, doership will cease and all three karmas will come to an end. Why is that? Who is the doer of action? It is ego. The ego that is aware of itself as I am this body and mind. Whatever actions are done by mind, speech, or body are experienced by us as I am doing this. I am sitting here, I am talking, I am thinking. All these it's I who is doing it. So ego is the doer because it identifies itself with the instruments of action. Ego is also the experiencer. As Bhagavan says, if we are the doer, we will have to experience the resulting fruit. So ego is the doer and experiencer. When we know ourselves, ego will die. Then thereby doership and experiencership will come to an end. When there's no one to do any karma, there cannot be any agamya. When there's no one to experience the fruit of any action, but sanchitra and prarabdha also, they also cease to exist because they exist only for the one who did the action. When the one who did the action died, they will all cease. As Bhagavan said in another verse, when if a husband has three wives, if he dies, all three wives become widows. Likewise, when ego dies, all three karmas cease to exist.
Thanks, James, for that. That was a very thorough and useful explanation.
Right.
We've, I think, finished for today. So we'll close with Bhagavan's mantra and thank Michael for these wonderful answers and some very good questions.
Please thank Bhagavan, because we can thank those who ask questions. That's very useful. But the answers, it all comes from Bhagavan. So we can only thank Bhagavan.
Sure. But
Bhagavan said something even more. Bhagavan said, when someone asked him, because Bhagavan sometimes explained, but for the jnani, there is no awareness of body and world. So some people are, then Bhagavan, how you answer all our questions? If you have no mind, no ego, if you're not aware of any of these things, how are you answering these questions? Bhagavan said, from the same source from which the questions arise, from that source too, the answers arise. So the questions arise from ego. Where does ego come from? From I am. So the answers that are coming from Bhagavan are answers coming from our own real nature. So all thanks only to Bhagavan. If at all I say anything that's of any use, it can only come from him. It can't come from me.
And we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Yes, I'll just say one thing. But Bhagavan willing, in 2 weeks I will start to talk about Aksharam Malay. My hope is, if Bhagavan makes it possible, to talk about 4 verses each meeting. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Arunachala Ramanaya.